I say you should be breaking the call into 4 quarters, and I sort of see it like the American football analogy. Here's the difference. In American football, you can have a shocker for the first 3 quarters, and then have a Hail Mary, and you can win.
How to run the perfect discovery call. Welcome back to a fresh episode of Breaking B2B. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, founder over at BreakingB2B.com. Joining me today, we've got a bit of a special one, bit of an unusual one. 2 guests for the price of 1. We've got Richard Smith and Mark Ackers, sales leaders over at My Sales Coach, and they freshly launched their book, Deconstructing Discovery. Welcome on the show, lads. How are we doing?
Really good, thanks. Cheers, Sam.
Yeah, I'm really well, but I'm curious, 2 for the price of 1. Rich, have you been paid to be here and just kept it for yourself?
There you go. So it's a bit of an unusual one. I said that before we hit record. And usually we're interviewing marketing leaders, or we're giving kind of solo episodes around what's working today in B2B marketing. But every now and then I like to throw in interviews with sales leaders like yourself. 1, to keep me on my toes, and 2, to keep the marketers and founders that tune in, watch and listen on their toes. So it should be a fun one. All things discovery calls. We're going to talk about the importance of sales discovery calls in B2B, mistakes that reps often make. Should your sales team be splitting up their calls like prospecting, discovery, presentations, demos, follow-ups and all that good stuff, and do a bit of a framework for what makes a perfect discovery call based on your freshly launched book, Deconstructing Discovery. So with that, gents, how important really are discovery calls right now and beyond from a B2B perspective?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think they've always been really important. I think it's now critical, Sam. I think it is getting harder and harder to differentiate. Right, there is. I'll just choose software as a category, but of course, I think this is appropriate across many other sectors and verticals. Is that spaces are getting louder and noisier. There's new startups popping up left, right, and center. Buyers are kind of exhausted, and it's very difficult for them to really distinguish the differences, quite frankly, between products and services that are out there. More than ever before, and the truth of the matter is that in sales, and as a salesperson, you aren't in control of these things. You're not in control of how many inbound leads that the marketing team are going to suddenly generate. You're not in control of your competition and how badly they're doing or how well they're doing. You're not in control of the market, and there's obviously been turbulent times in the economy, even very recently with tariffs and such like. So what do you do, right, when you're not in control of that, and you can't suddenly get your engineering team to build 50 feature releases to get you on a par with your competition? So you're really left with, well, how do I provide better buying experiences for the people I get in front of? Really, that's kind of where you're left with, and I firmly believe, and I've seen this in my career, is that you can help someone buy from you by having great conversations. Yes, product comes into it and all the rest of it, but ultimately in a world where buyers are struggling to make that decision, if you're able to have great conversations and great discovery conversations with your buyers, that can be your secret sauce. It's been mine and Mark's secret sauce, certainly in a world where we've been up against far bigger, more well-known, noisier competition in the past. And so, yeah, I think it's super critical, more than ever before. I'll let Mark add on his thoughts.
Are you tired of competitors ranking above you on Google, stealing traffic, leads, and mindshare from dream clients every time they're searching for your services or offers on Google? At Breaking B2B, we fix that with our unusual approach to SEO, content marketing, and websites. We craft B2B SEO strategies and websites for revenue, not vanity. Head over to breakingb2b.com to check our results, pricing, or to book a call with me.
the bit that Rich said that really is going to lead nicely is to help people buy. Here's the thing: salespeople always make the deadly assumption that who they're speaking to knows how to buy, and that's just not true, right? You know, Rich, I know you'll take this in the way it's intended, right? At a Lego, you were VP of sales. Lots of people would be excited to have a discovery call with a VP of sales, a company that size. Did you know how to buy easily?
Absolutely not. Like, I vague, maybe kind of a know sort of how to do it, but very difficult.
And how many things did you buy over that window? Maybe 15, 20 things, like you were there for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
So, Rich, if you ignore the fact he's in sales, right, but just think of him as a buyer, over his 8 years he bought maybe 15, 20 things. He's not an experienced buyer, but the seller is an experienced seller. They have 15, 20 discovery calls a week, maybe a month, depending on where they're at. So prospects need your help to buy often. They don't want to take help from someone they don't trust. Why would you, right? You get that feeling when you're speaking to somebody. And the way to build trust is to run great discovery. And the way to run great discovery is to ask the right questions, to control the conversation, to really map out what you're going to talk about, why you're going to talk about it. It's to gather the information, and you only gather information by getting it, right? Very rarely do you speak to a prospect that just wants to tell you everything. And sometimes you need to get answers to things they don't even know, right? So to do that, you've got to master the art of discovery. By mastering the art of discovery, you gather the right information. By gathering the right information, you can make the right suggestions. They therefore trust you, and they enable you to help them to buy. Discovery is absolutely key to all of that and your ability to run it. It's the most critical part of the sales process. It's where deals are won or silently lost. And like anything, nothing happens until something's sold, right? You can have the best products in the world, but if you're not selling anything, you can have the best marketing in the world, but you're not selling anything. You need to sell to build the business. Discovery is the core component of that.
Love it. Love it. A few things to dive into straight away, as I love to stir the pot. So, some great points, and especially like the points around kind of building trust, and especially being in kind of flooded markets, that this can be the differentiator, because we all know in B2B sales, no one goes with the first option, especially as you get into more complex and more higher ticket offerings. Folks make a shortlist, right? They evaluate 3, 4, 5 vendors, and they're probably speaking to 4 or 5 sales reps. Before we dive into some more tactical stuff, what are your thoughts on, so you're saying kind of selling is the differentiator, and how you run these discovery calls, absolutely fine. How much weight would you put on there? Like, dare I ask a percentage, i.e. the sales experience compared to, let's say, product, marketing, building the brand? Like, is there a weightage? And feel free to be biased, because I like banter.
So I'll start with this one, since Rich started with the last one. I think that's a very hard question to answer, because there's lots of factors. So I'll tell you what I've seen in my career. If you build a product that has great social proof, it's everywhere, it kind of defines a category, people will just have biasness and want to buy that, right? We do that in our lives, right? So, trying to think of an example, I've got an unconscious biasness for, let's say, alcohol, right? I want to have a certain type of beer. I don't know all the different beers out there, but I've got an unconscious biasness for a beer, as I have for clothes, as I have for cars, as I have for holidays, even like destinations. That unconscious biasness can just win. You can be a very, very average sales rep and take orders at a company that's got an unbelievable product, unbelievable space, market leading, market defining, of course. Most people don't have that luxury. Most people sell something that is very, very similar to 15 to 20 other different options in a very competitive market space, with people that don't really know how to buy. It's not top of their priority. They haven't got a budget set aside, and it's very, very difficult. The weight there on your ability to run a discovery call is it's like 80-90%. Like that. This is key, because actually it's not about selling. It's about, do they want to buy? Should I spend my time here? okay, they do, I will spend my time here. I'm going to help them realise that this is the best option, but they're going to be the ones that buy. I'm going to facilitate that.
I'll maybe just like add maybe a couple of like additional stories to on the back of that. And again, I agree with Mark. It's a difficult question to give a simple percentage weighting answer. But I remember vividly, and this happened on numerous occasions. I remember vividly when we were at Refract, and we were, for all intents and purposes, a David up against some big Goliaths, right? And we were very conscious of that. And I remember selling to a prospect who, I'd had 2 or 3 conversations with him, and he said, "Rich, I'm in a really difficult position here." He's like, "I am being told by my colleagues to just go and buy the more well-known brand, the one that everyone's got, right? I'm under pressure to do that, but I'm finding it hard because you've quite frankly delivered a better buying experience. I feel like you understand what I'm trying to achieve at a much deeper level than when I've been on a call with your competition." And I totally got his challenge, right? Like and ultimately, if you think about sales, like selling, you're trying to kind of de-risk things for your buyer, and great discovery should help to de-risk and make your buyer feel more comfortable. But in that situation, the buyer did end up going ahead with Refract, but there were other situations where that didn't happen, where the big market leader won on brand, right? But it just goes to show that I think when your buyer understands, like if the buyer feels that you understand them, you can win your deals based on that. And I think that's really powerful, maybe for your audience, Sam. Startups, solopreneurs, people trying to get their business off the ground, where they're like, God, that I am seen as the risky option. I am less well known. I don't have the name. I don't have all of the reviews online, whatever it may be. You can win deals by showing buyers that you give a shit, quite frankly. And I'll just finish with this one story, and I actually included this in our book. About a couple of months ago, we had one of our customers come into our weekly sales team stand-up. This guy is a VP of sales, and I asked him the question. I said, "Timmy, one question I've got is I want to get in the head of a buyer." And I said, "Tell me, what is the most important thing for you when you jump on a call with a salesperson?" And he said, and again, the exact words are in the book, but he said something like, I have to get the feeling that the person I'm speaking to understands my world and understands what I'm trying to achieve. And he said they may have the best, they may have the best product in the market, but if they can't do that, then I lose trust in them. And I thought it was such a powerful statement, and again, just kind of backs up why having powerful discovery conversations can be your secret sauce.
I feel like this resonates a lot with myself, and it might with you guys as well. I can't remember how old my sales coach is, your company, but at Breaking B2B, like our business is only just 14 months old. So yeah. nearly every discovery call I go is almost an uphill battle because we aren't known. Like, unless folks have been following me on LinkedIn or the podcast, which is a small percentage of the total addressable market, there's so many big boys in the SEO game for B2B and SaaS. So nearly every call, it's like we're evaluating the top 3, like you're the undercut. And I feel like being able to, like those points that you've said, if you can get that prospect, whether it's a marketing leader, a sales leader, whoever your dream client is, on side and start asking questions that do build trust, it is a differentiator. So I do agree with a lot of this stuff. So it's a fun conversation, and I appreciate the story. Now, let's get a little bit tactical. We're going to go through the framework in a second, but what I want to ask is, you mentioned just now that kind of question or information gathering, and I reckon that some marketing leaders tuning into this, they're starting to cringe now. They're like, I bloody hate sales calls where sales rep just asked me 100 questions that they could have just emailed or sent me a questionnaire or Google Doc, whatever. I've asked this question before to folks like Benjamin Dennehy, but curious to know your take. Like, how do you make a discovery call kind of genuinely valuable and useful to a prospect opposed to a information gathering exercise?
I think it's a great question. You're right. Most buyers hate jumping on calls, discovery calls with salespeople, because they've had bad experiences, because those conversations sound like interrogations, sound like, hey, I've got a bunch of qualification questions to ask you, right? I'm going to ask you to basically, first of all, qualify, are you even worthy of my time as a salesperson? I mean, can you imagine what goes through a prospect's head when the first few questions you ask them is like, oh, so, what's your tech stack look like, and how many users do you think you would have on your team? Like, it just sounds so self-indulgent. And I think most salespeople, what they struggle with is they actually think that the discovery has to be like this predefined set of questions that they need to go and ask their buyer. But also, I think, quite frankly, from experience, most discovery calls end up just being like, actually not that at all. It's a salesperson comes on and just wants to talk about all the great things about their product and their business, and just goes straight to showing features and benefits. On the flip side, what makes a great discovery conversation is still asking questions, but questions which actually sound like a conversation, questions which are driven by what you last heard the prospect say. Not a checklist, but you're asking questions based on what you're hearing the prospect say. You're getting curious, you're going deeper, I'll give you a great example of this. I was on a discovery call this morning with a CRO, and I asked them a question, they gave me an answer, and I didn't really understand what they meant. And I said, listen, I'm sorry, I just didn't really understand what you said then. I want to make sure I understand it because I think it's important. You said X, can you tell me what you mean by that? Now, that is inherently sounds massively different to the types of questions that most prospects get from salespeople, which sound like the same questions they get asked again and again. It sounds like someone who, again, gives a shit, actually does genuinely want to understand because they're seeking to help. So, I agree that the reason buyers traditionally hate these experiences is because they don't feel like the questions they get asked are valuable for them. They feel like it's all intentionally designed to help the salesperson, not help the prospect. So obviously we share copious examples in our book of how to do that, of how to not make these conversations sound scripted, sound like every other call the buyer's been on with a salesperson that year. But yeah, Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think first of all, when a prospect engages with a salesperson, they're not engaging with me, who I am and how my friends and family know me. They're engaging with their perception of a salesperson. And most people's perception of salespeople is negative. That might not be true in our bubble, in our little world on LinkedIn that we've created, where we all believe in leveling up and this perfect. That's not the case. But if you actually just step into the real world and you ask the average person, what do you think of salespeople? It's not pleasant, right? It's just not. That people have got that perception, they've got that stereotype. So when they get on the call with you, they look at you through their tinted lenses of their perception of salespeople. So you're right. If you just start going, right, I've got a load of questions to ask you. Questions like, you get that you don't want in a retail store. How can I help you? Oh, nothing. Leave me alone. I'm just looking. A car showroom. What are you looking for today? Oh, nothing. Just looking. Right, just want to push that person away. If on a discovery call you're asking questions that really are just so salesy, like, so how many people in your team? How many seats do you maybe need? People don't like that. If you ask questions that you really should know the answer to, like, so tell me, what's the most important thing in your world right now? Really, as a salesperson, you know that. So if you're just going to ask these generic, surface level, boring, obvious, salesy questions, you're right. It's gonna repel you from that prospect. But actually, if you just focus on a conversation that is relevant to the reasons they even want to speak to you, right? Because they're on the call, they're there for a reason. It'd be so easy just to not show up and block that person and never to. They've come for a reason. They want something. If you focus the call on that and front load your question with, look, this is the reason I'm going to ask you these questions. I'm doing that so I can present the right solution. Now, I might not even be able to do that. What I have might not be for you, right? But help me understand your world, why you're even here, what do you want? From there, I can share some ideas that may or may not be relevant. Then you shift from a sales call to having a conversation with someone that potentially has what you want, and you start to trust them because they don't sound like a salesperson, they sound like a consultant. And that is a totally different shift that most salespeople struggle to do because they stick to their script. That's what they've been trained. They fail to ask those tough questions because they don't want to upset the prospect, or they're connected to the outcome, or they ask the sales questions because they're worried about their targets, their quotas, and they've got that commission breath. And that's where it all starts to fall down, that perception of a salesperson and you really matching up to that.
Yeah, I like it. And I'd argue, especially on the inbound perspective, like some of those basic ones, your website should be doing some of that hard work for you anyway, in terms of capturing a lot of that info around kind of what they actually want to get done, and then you can stick to the meaty questions, the in-depth stuff for the sales discovery. So you've started sharing out some tactical stuff there. Like, it sounded like a bit of an upfront agenda, which is nice. So it'd be cool to know. I know you've got a framework that you share in the book, so I think it'd be cool to dive straight into kind of some action items. Like, if anyone's tuning in and they want to ramp up their discovery sessions and make them more productive from now, like what is that step one that you just shared there, or is there a step before? Let's kind of roll through the framework.
Well, the first step is preparation. Like Rich in the book, this is Rich's framework that he's perfected and he's had influence on for sure. But the PPREPCOO framework, but that takes you through what to do before. But then there's on the call, there's a framework for really how to run that call as well. I'll let Rich talk through PPREPCOO, then I'll talk through when you're on the call, sort of the 4 quarters of the call and how to run it.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge that I see so many people having, Sam, is, especially in the world of like virtual selling, is where like we're in this kind of habit of like jumping from Zoom call to Zoom call and almost kind of winging it. And when I think back to like calls that typically don't go well for me, so often it's because I didn't actually prepare for the conversation. So this framework really takes you through, and I'll not go through all of it, but it's designed to be like 20 minutes time that will help you have not just the right understanding and background behind who you're about to speak with, but gets you in the zone of, okay, how do I envisage the first sort of 5 minutes of this conversation sounding, and what are all of the possible outcomes that could happen at the end of this call? And even just having that is a massive leap forward to what so many people have, which is, I'm just going to jump in this call. I've just clicked off end call off my last call. I'm going to quickly just bring up the person's LinkedIn profile. Yeah, okay, this is their job title. Right, I'm straight into it. And so PPREPCOO basically starts by spending time looking at their LinkedIn. Like, what can you learn about them as a person? What they've decided to share? Like, do they share things that they are passionate about? Do they share things on their profile things that they are focused on right now? Like, a lot of people will actually put like their top 3 areas of focus as a business. How can you start to connect the dots between what you sell and what that person is interested in? What kind of person do they appear to be, right? Do they appear to be quite serious and direct? Do they look like there's someone who's a bit more energetic, or do they look like someone who won't want all the detail, or do they look like someone who you're going to have to go slower with? A lot of the time people aren't actually figuring this out till actually get on the call. Actually, you can start to do this before you actually get on the conversation. And that can help you understand, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be asking 30 questions to the person who is a bit more direct, who just wants things simplified. All the way through to like company news, right? Like, we got all these amazing AI tools now that say, hey, like, you can create prompts to say, give me the background to this business over the last year. What investment have they had? You can use old-fashioned Google alerts or Google News to search for the company's CEO. What's the CEO been talking about in the press in the last 3 months? Because that often is a big giveaway to strategically what everybody in that business is going to be focused on. So, like, this framework, people think, oh, I need to spend like 3 hours researching, preparing for my call. You don't. you can do 20 minutes and you can be immensely prepared and in the right frame of mind to basically go on that call, and above anything else, Sam, is like showing the person, the prospect, you're different, that you're not just jumping from call to call, that actually you come on the call and something as little as, hey, I noticed that you've been in the role for 7 months now. What have you learned in that time? And it's like, how many prospects get asked that question where the salesperson's gone to their like immense effort of seeing that they've been in their role for 7 months, which takes like 2 seconds. It's little things like that that can make all the difference, that can make the prospect again feel like this isn't just another sales call. I'm here with someone who is actually looking to help. So in the book, PPREPCOO goes into a lot more detail than that, but it's designed to be a quick framework that gets you fully prepared in 20 minutes for the call.
It's a nice touch, and I think some of this is undercooked. So I'm in a bit of a bubble because a lot of my connections, especially on LinkedIn, are B2B marketing, SaaS marketing leaders, and they talk so much, especially now, a lot of folks are talking about brand marketing and differentiating in the marketplace, which is all good stuff, don't get me wrong. But they often, as a lot of them aren't actually doing the selling, and I think this is where folks like us have got a bit of an advantage. Like I'm doing founder-led sales because I've only got two full-time employees and trusted contractors, and you folks have been selling for donkey's years. They don't actually realise some of these nuances that come in actual sales conversations like discovery calls, and they don't realise that there is areas to win in things like this, not just discovery calls, but all aspects of the sales process. And I think it's something that's overlooked, especially by marketing leaders, not out of ignorance or anything like that, but purely because they haven't necessarily done the role.
Yeah.
Don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I've got an unfair advantage that I sell to the people the person that I used to be type of thing. But that being said, like you don't have to have walked in that prospect's shoes to do a good job here. It definitely helps, don't get me wrong, and it can help with your credibility. But again, like the things that we've shared on this call, so on this podcast so far, like are things anybody can do, but can make you be different, right? There is so much average out there, Sam, and it's not necessarily down to like average reps. It's not their fault. Like a lot of the time, they've just never been shown how to do it. But it's really not difficult to just make the prospect, even if you're like, hey, I'm an account exec with 2 years of experience. I'm about to sell to a CMO who's like got 15, 20 years experience in marketing leadership. What do I know about their role? Well, I'll tell you what, you might not know as much as they do, but you can certainly make them feel different.
Yeah, I like the small touches. Cool. Let's I like the research points. So let's jump into what Mark's got for the tactical stuff in terms of running the discovery calls.
Yeah, so at its highest level, and obviously it's really broken down in depth in the book, but most discovery calls are 30 minutes. I always think the way to bring to life how little time that is 3 minutes on small talk feels quite reasonable. It's 10% of your time, right? Like it goes so quick. Checking calendars, right, could easily take 2 minutes. You lose so much of your time on lots of things. I say you should be breaking the call into 4 quarters, and I sort of see it like the American football analogy. Here's the difference. In American football, you can have a shocker for the first 3 quarters, and then have a Hail Mary, and you can win. It is the complete opposite when it comes to discovery. You have to start strong. You've got to win from the start. And actually, if you win from the start, you can be pretty crap at closing. It just happens, right? Because they bought into you. So I break down to the first quarter is really that small talk. Get that out of the way as quickly as possible. Obviously, you've got to have a little bit, but people confuse small talk for rapport building. Rapport building happens all the way through. Small talk's kind of like how you're doing. Notice there's a bike in the background, you ride. Right? But then you get the golden minute. The golden minute is the key part of the call. This is why you're here. Why have you chosen to come here? Of all the things you could do, of all the things you could speak to, why are you speaking to me, a salesperson? What they say then, how they say it, the words they use, the language they use, the emphasis they put, their tonality, their energy, their body language, and actually what they don't say as well, right? the pauses, the inclinations, what you do with that information will make or break your discovery call. And that is where most reps go wrong. They waste it. They just absolutely waste it. But you've got that small talk and golden minute. That's the first quarter. The second quarter is deep discovery. What's the goal here? What are you trying to achieve? Why? Why does that even matter? The third quarter is, okay, there's something tangible now. Let's dig deeper. Let's clarify. Let's create some pain and urgency. And no doubt there'll be some statements or objections. And people can confuse the two for the same thing, right? Statements or objections. But then you've got Q4. You need to have time set aside for what the next steps. Again, I see so many reps get here and they're like, oh, I'm only halfway through. And they lose the prospect because the prospect's jumping it. You're just one of their calls today, right? They've not been looking forward to this. They've not been preparing for it. You're just one of their calls that day. So the fourth quarter is that the next steps and the time commitments, and it's vital that you don't lose the control there because that's when you don't get the next step. So that's my sort of structure for running a discovery call, the 4 quarters, but it have to start strong.
I love that golden minute at the start as well.
It's not a phrase. I think we coined it. I took it from something that was called the golden hour.
Okay.
Which was, it's like a detective phrase. That basically, if you get to a crime scene, you've got an hour. The quicker you can work with what you've got in that hour, the better chance you've got of solving the case. And I think that first minute, which really is like 3 or 4 minutes, is the golden minute. What you do with that leads to how successful you're going to be.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got quarter 1 small talk, quarter 2 deep discovery, quarter 3 digging deep into what was discussed previously, and then, is that right? And then 4 next steps.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's leave small talk because I think folks will know what that means. In terms of deep discovery, what does that look like? I mean, you can give an example. Perhaps we're selling some kind of B2B SaaS or software or something like that. Like, what are we digging into? Are we digging into things like why they want to look at now and what their goals are, or is it a bit more to it? Like, give us some examples if you can.
Structure.
There's a chapter in the book, Sam, called Getting the Compelling Reasons to Buy. And this is ultimately, like, if you can't get there on that first call, then the chances of that deal going anywhere are very slim, right? Because if you can't get to a place with your prospect where you understand what their compelling reasons to buy are, and they believe that you have a solution for that, then you're going to run the risk of, like, basically being strung along potentially by a prospect who can't say no to you, and you end up in chase mode, and your pipeline is full of deals that are just hopeful deals, right? That just sit there and collect dust for weeks, months on end. Again, the challenge people have is, how do I get there, right? And that is really difficult for a lot of people to do, is how do I get to a point where a prospect shares their compelling reasons to buy? Here's the thing. You have to get comfortable that not every prospect you sell to will have compelling reasons to buy, right? If they did, it would be easy. So you have to you have to understand the questions to ask and how to ask them to establish basically the 4 answers to 4 answers to these questions. Does this prospect have a problem that I can solve? What I mean by that is, when the prospect opens their mouth, do they say things, even if they're super high level, that sound like the types of things that people who went on to buy from me before have said before? If they say things that don't really sound like things I solve, it's a deal that you don't want to pursue time with. Number 2, how big is that problem? Very, very key here. People talk about problems all the time. I had a prospect yesterday that told me they had a massive they had this problem around their sales managers not being able to forecast very well. It sounded like a big problem, but when it came down to it, they were like, do you know what? This is a problem, like a constant topic of conversation. But we're focused on these 2 other things right now instead. Right? The prospect decided that the problem was a problem. It just wasn't big enough. The third question you need to get the answer to is, if you establish that the answers to the first 2 questions, and they're both yes, is, okay, but is the prospect wanting to solve that big problem now, or at least in the very near term? people live with big problems in their lives all the time, but sometimes don't take action on those things. Right, like we can all think of those things in our personal life that are like you know are big problems. They were in your mind, but you don't take action on them for numerous different reasons, right? And if the answer to that question is yes, then the fourth question that you need to answer is, okay, so why should the prospect choose you to solve that big problem now versus somebody else, or alternatively try to tackle it themselves internally? So I think it would take too long to talk about exactly how to do that. It's laid out in our book, but ultimately, like, if you think of those 4 killer questions, that is the staple of, like, ultimately dictating, like, should your discovery call have a next step or not? And I think too many salespeople, probably quite frankly, are quite good at maybe getting the answer to question 1, but struggle to get the answers to 2 and 3. They struggle to figure out, is this a big problem? And do you know what a lot of that is? It sounds so simple. They fear asking the prospect the question, quite literally. So you said this is a problem. Like, how big is this problem? Right? Like, is this something that you can live with? Mark has taught me a brilliant question, always learning off each other. Like, where a prospect says, I'd like to solve that. And Mark's question, which I now ask, is, so when you said, I'd like to solve it, that's different to I need to solve it. Is this a like to solve or need to solve problem? Because they're 2 very different things. And it's amazing what happens when you ask that question to prospects. They go, yeah, that is a good point. Probably like more. And that's great, right? That's the answer I'm looking for, right? But ultimately, I think people struggle to get the compelling reasons to buy because they simply are nervous about asking the questions that get them to truth. And we see this in sales all the time. People just basically anxiety to ask direct, sometimes challenging questions to prospects that helps them basically get to a point of understanding the reality.
Yeah, some great points. And I think I used to be that rep, right? Because whilst I maybe call myself a marketer, but I do a lot of sales, being the founder of Breaking B2B. So I used to be that person. I used to be scared stiff. If I was speaking to a marketing leader or a revenue leader, getting on calls with them, I'd ask them a kind of set maybe of scripted questions on discovery calls, and then take their answer as gospel truth, and that have done with it, send a proposal and hope for the best, and then wonder why kind of we close like 1 in 20 deals and not really think much more of it. As the years have gone by, and I've interviewed kind of smart folks like you, read a ton of books and learnt the hard way, I realised that's not always the case, and what you said, a lot of it rings true. Now, for younger reps or folks that are leading sales team, how can they kind of get their reps to that level where they're not scared, they're not anxious, they see, whether it's a marketing leader, a sales leader, a product leader, an engineering leader, whoever that they sell to, as a peer, as opposed to someone above them? How can you kind of get your confidence level to, you're on the same level as them? If they've given a fluffy answer, or they've raised a problem but you're not sure if it's an expensive problem that they're actually motivated to get shit done with, like how can we get ourselves there?
So I think there's a few things at play here, right? First of all, we're talking about confidence and mindset, imposter syndrome. Everyone's got that, right? But confidence really is a result of competence. When you feel confident in doing something, when you feel competent in doing something, the confidence comes. I always remember, passing my driving test. The first time I got in the car by myself, I remember saying to myself, "This isn't right. I shouldn't be allowed in this car by myself."
Still true today.
Fake news. But I do remember getting in the car thinking, "No, I shouldn't be allowed in this car." Even though I passed my test, I didn't have the confidence. That went within a couple of hours. I remember joking with my friends, seeing a learner driver going, "Oh, I've got no time for them." Just having a bit of a laugh, But when it comes to running sales calls, you've got to make sure they've got the competence, and the confidence will come. You can mask confidence, but the competence you can't. You either can do it or you can't. A sales leader's number one job is to coach, train, and develop their sales team. Here's the problem. They don't have the time to do it. They're stretched really thin. They've got loads of urgent action items. They're really busy, and they're not measured on that. So you can always wait till tomorrow, right? I'll coach them tomorrow. I'll just jump in. I'll do this call myself. I'll help them. I'll write the email. It's the manager's job. It should be their number one responsibility to coach and train the team. But they struggle for lots of different reasons, and that's why so many companies and sales leaders work with my sales coach, right, to amplify and accelerate that development of the team. But that's what it all comes down to: making sure your team actually have the competence to do it. The confidence, the imposter syndrome will all go. Not completely though. I still get nervous going on some discovery calls. You know, that I can see someone LinkedIn profile and they can look uber scary. You know, very stern LinkedIn photo. Maybe it's black and white. Maybe they're slightly tilted, looking away. Maybe they've got very serious language, and I can think, you know, shit, I'm in for a tough time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually had one like that the other day. This was one of the first discovery calls that generally shook me. Like, this was quite a late one as well, because we work with quite a lot of US clients. So some days I open up my calendar to like 8:30, 9 p.m. at night, so it can suit PST time zones in US. And I think we actually got this lead from a cold email, and then we'd sent them like a Loom video with an SEO website review, gave them some actionable ideas, and they agreed to a discovery call. And usually, like, marketing leaders are reasonably laid back, sometimes a bit stern. And so I kind of jumped on the call, did my usual thing, said like, looking forward to the convo, sounds like you've looked at the video, and I guess really I've given you some action items. What would you like to have happen by the end of this chat? And he came at me straight away. He was like, I've got no time for sales questions. I want to know exactly what you can do for me. I can see the process, otherwise you're wasting my time. And I said, look, I can show you some stuff. And then he barked at me again. He said, I've got no time for questions, like full on. Like I was literally like this, what the heck's going on? Like literally barking at me. And I said, I wouldn't have done this years gone by. I said, look, this has got to be a conversation. There's got to be some back and forth. I can give you some ideas, but I have to ask some questions to understand, one, if you're a company we can help, and two, exactly what you're looking for. Otherwise, I'm just going to give you generic information. Then he took a step back eventually and said, okay. So it shows you even after doing this for a long time, you can get taken by surprise on these calls.
True, but in fairness to yourself, Sam, you're probably saying like you probably wouldn't have done that a few years ago, right?
Definitely
you would have
not.
probably just kind of, all right, I'm just going to give you a generic presentation or whatever it may be. And interesting, there is a chapter in the book called "The Difficult Prospect," which basically gives like lots of different scenarios, very similar to what you've described there, that all salespeople have faced, where they get challenging prospects on calls, and it kind of talks through like transcripts and of where we've been in those situations. But here's why what you did work so well is you didn't do what most salespeople do, and what that person's probably used to, of salespeople probably just capitulating and actually saying, you made yourself more of a trusted advisor by simply saying, listen, if that's the way you want to run it, like, I know from experience that's not going to be a valuable use of your time. And they changed their tune, right? And it's a classic thing in discovery of, I call like going left, when like you look like you're about to take it all away from them, they pull you back in. Like one of the examples I gave in the book, similar to yourself, is when you get on a call with a prospect and they look really distracted. Like, they look like stressed, they look like really they don't want to be there, quite frankly. Maybe they're just like, this is the last call they needed on that day, and you can visibly see it in their face. They've probably got a dual screen, their eyes are like over there, like typing emails to someone on Slack. And I had this very recently, in fact, and I said, listen, James, I just get the impression this just looks like a terrible time to be having this conversation. Should we just like pull the plug on this now, when we can maybe talk tomorrow? It was amazing what happened. He looked at me and was like, nope, you've got my full attention. And he literally, it was almost like the second screen vanished. And it was because I called it out. I did what most salespeople wouldn't do. Most salespeople are like, oh, I've got to make the most of this call. I can't have this call be pushed back. And actually, like, if I didn't do that, it would have been a pretty mediocre conversation, quite frankly, because I knew he wasn't all in the room. General theme coming out of this conversation is being different, is going against the grain of what a lot of prospects, buyers have experienced with salespeople. That can be the thing that can make your conversations and make you just be seen as a more trusted advisor on a call.
Yeah, love it. So just as we wrap up, guys, I'd like to know if there's any other pointers that folks should consider when it comes to building trust on these calls, and also what your recommendations are in terms of, you said it at the start of the call, see if the next step makes sense. What does that look like in terms of, I guess, either qualifying in or qualifying a prospect out?
Yeah, I'll just give one tip, and then I'll let Mark jump in with his. I think one thing that can help build trust on a discovery call is telling prospects like who you're not right for, and there's a part in the book that is about like positioning statements, and it's saying, hey, like, if you were telling me that this is what you care about, this is what's really important, I'd actually say we're probably not the best fit. Like, that's not really what we are strongest in, or that's not something that we put a lot of focus on, quite frankly. And when you say that to prospects, it has this almost magical power of like them feeling like, I trust this person more because they're not telling me that they're great at everything or that they specialize in everything. And it helps you actually spend more time with the right types of prospects too. So when it comes to answering that killer question number 4, like, why are you best placed to somebody else? Start that statement, start that kind of response to say, hey, I'll tell you, if we were on this conversation and you were telling me that these 1 or 2 things were really important to you, I'd be saying at this stage we're not the right fit. However, you've mentioned to me that actually this is what's important to you and you want to make sure you get this right. And normally when I hear those things, that's normally why people opt to work with us, for these reasons. It's a superpower. It can make people just almost feel like they're at the right place, or maybe at the wrong place, and that's fine. If they're at the wrong place, you establish that, you call it quits. But yeah, I'll finish on that, and I'll let Mark jump in with his.
I'm somewhat conscious of time, just being completely transparent. I think, look, here's the headline. If the discovery's done well, the next step's just logical. Logical for you, logical for them. They're easy to buy into. If there's ever any friction, something's gone wrong.
Yeah. I think that's a good marketing and sales lesson. Know who you're for and know who you're not for, and be clear and transparent about that, because that goes a long way. So with that said, Richard, Mark, really appreciate the conversation. A lot of gems for me, and I'm sure everyone watching, listening in. So please do tell us more about the brand new book, My Sales Coach, and anything else you want to plug.
So I'll hold the book up and I'll let Mark talk about it.
Do you know what? Michelle brought it in on the sly. Deconstructing Discovery is the book that me and Rich wished we had at the start of our careers. It is tactics, talk tracks, frameworks. There's no theory in here. It's all actionable from the minute a call gets booked all the way to the very end stages of your discovery, including negotiation and final steps. It's literally just a book that you can pick up, go to any chapter and start to take away advice that you can implement into your own calls. It's out today, and Rich, this is breaking news. Whilst we're on the webinar, it has become a #1 bestseller. So that is what we're aiming for, which is awesome. Today and today only, it's $7.99, which is the cheapest Amazon would let us put it. We wanted to really help make it accessible to everybody. It'll be $11.99 from tomorrow, and it will never return to this price ever again. But yeah, it's a book all around how to run discovery calls like a pro, and it will help you have better conversations, better outcomes.
Nice one, gents. Look, really appreciate the chat, and yeah, make sure you get yourself a copy, or get your sales team a copy of Deconstructing Discovery, or at the very least follow Richard or Mark on LinkedIn, sharing some great stuff on sales tips each and every day. So with that, lads, thanks very much. Enjoyed the chat.
Thank you, Sam. And Richard and Mark, you don't have to choose between us. You can follow us both.
And if you haven't yet, why not join thousands of B2B legends enjoying my weekday newsletter for unusual B2B marketing strategies, SEO tips, weird experiments I'm running, and fresh podcast updates. Head over to breakingb2b.com and hit that newsletter tab. And with that, I shall catch you on the next one. Cheers.